All right, I'm going to start doing this. Let me pull up my stuff. So, yesterday at the theory class of mine yesterday, we were focusing on MIDI, and we were talking about MIDI drums. But I realized that most people here are going to be working with MIDI that is not drums. So I kind of want to show you. I made a really basic version of a song that you'll be familiar with. I'll show you. And it's going to sound very robotic, and I'm going to show you ways to kind of fix how robotic it sounds. Can you hear it? Yep. Okay, here we go. Okay, so that's an original composition. And what do you notice about how this sounds? What does it sound like to you? Like, obviously, it's sort of a string quartet. It's maybe like it's like 2 violins and a cello, basically. But what do you notice about how it sounds? Does it sound really, does it sound like real humans are playing it? No, right? It just sounds like robots playing it. It sounds like how it sounds when you press play on MuseScore. So, what's one thing you notice that I've done though? I've taken one action to help things sound different. What have you noticed that I've done? Are there actually 6 different instruments here?
No, I mean I wasn't here for the beginning bit of this, but I know that you put you had a section where it was pizzicato instead of arco.
Yes. So here, these 2 things here are actually the same part. I just had it go. I don't even know if this is possible on one violin, but probably not. But I created a different instrument because it's a different tone that I want now, and it's easier for me to make it sound good when I split up the MIDI into different instruments when they're performing different functions. When the same instrument, like if I had one instrument that was doing like a tremolo, I would also create that for a different instrument. So the different effects, I wouldn't leave them on the same instrument because the volumes change. It's just kind of annoying to go in and like fix all the little MIDI blocks. So that's the one thing I've done. The other thing that is pretty easy to do here is notice how all the volumes look. I can show you on this window too. Right here, they're all exactly the same. So the first thing I can do to make sure that it doesn't sound bad when I'm listening to it is just to make sure the volumes sound better. So I'll go through here. I'll probably solo the melody, and then I can kind of fit everything in around it. Okay, that already sounds a little bit better to me. Um,
What did you do to change it again exactly?
I just changed the volumes
Oh,
because when I pulled all the MIDI in, it all starts at the exact same volume. So when I listen back to it, I'm like, well, the melody doesn't sound like it's the focus. What's going on? What's another thing that I can readily do here to help think about how a string quartet is set up? Are they all stacked on top of each other on the same chair? So what can I do? Mari, what can I do?
You can like pan the parts, the different
Yeah,
double and then pan that way.
yeah, exactly. Yes, and you can double too. You can layer stacks of things. So I'm going to do the same thing. I always do this where I start with the melody because that's what I want to focus on. So I'm going to start there. And then maybe I'll move this. It's easier to notice if you're if you're using headphones, by the way. That's one thing I'd really recommend. While you're doing this, if you're using your computer speakers, it's not going to be you're not going to be able to tell the difference. And even if you have headphones that are like earbuds or something, you'll hear like the bass, you'll hear the high stuff, and you'll hear whether it's in your left ear or right ear. Okay. Maybe I'll move this to the right. Okay, that's nice. I can hear clearly what I want to hear. And then I'm just going to take that same panning and I'm going to apply it to the other same part. So the violin, second violin, I'm going to put also at 21. This one, I'm also going to put it 20. So they spatially sound like they're in the same area. So the main thing that happens when you import MIDI is even if you have dynamics written into MuseScore or whatever notation software, like say you have mezzo piano, it'll set all of those things to the same velocity. So even if you're like, okay, I want this at mezzo piano right now, it's gonna all be at like 60 velocity. And then I want it forte now, it'll all be at 90. And no human plays at the exact same velocity a bunch of times in a row. So let's look at the melody here. Do you notice how these are all the same color here? And we can do this too. This is a good thing to look at. This automation button here. Look at that. Look how horrible that is. The velocity is the exact same the whole time. This is when you import MIDI from notation, this is what it's going to look like. So what you need to do is you need to figure out how a human would actually play these notes and try to get your virtual instrument to sound as much like a real human would play it as possible. This can be a little bit daunting if you have like a million instruments. What I would recommend is, and also if Louisa is going to be playing violin for me or something, or for you, you don't have to worry about going in and fine tuning all the MIDI, because you know that she's a great violin player and she's going to play it like a person, and that immediately is going to solve a whole bunch of problems. But if you have other instruments that aren't going to be replaced, I would focus on the sections where those are the melodic point of the focal point. So don't worry about a bunch of instruments and figuring out like your second clarinet and the whatever. that sort of just blends in anyway. Don't worry about that. Focus on where the melody is at any given moment, and then that's what you should fine tune. And if everything kind of fills in around that and sounds good, then it's probably good enough. So I'm actually going to step away from this for right now, because the easiest way to correct your MIDI velocity is to re-perform the part. So even though you clicked and dragged the MIDI in, if there's a part that just doesn't sound that good, what you should do is probably, oh no, why does that say? It's pizzicato. I don't know why it's not being pizzicato. Please do this. Okay, so here, let's look at this part. Once again, since we imported this from notation software, it sounds like this. We are robots and we sing songs. It's fun. Yeah. But it's not, because it's boring sounding. What I want it to do is I want it to sound more like, whoop, that. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to re-record it. It'll play the right notes, and I'll try to make the, all right, 1, 2. So let's look at what that looks like. What I didn't even think about it. All I did was replay these notes in, and look, the velocities are different now. I can go in and edit these velocities, but what me just performing that in there, I'll show you, I'll compare the two. I'm going to quantize it. I'm going to actually make it metronomically perfect, but the velocities are going to feel more human, and that's going to fix a lot. So here's what the original one sounds like. Here's the one I just performed. It's subtle, but it feels more human, and it's going to be more interesting than this, you know, constant, boring rhythm. So I'm just going to replace that. There are some instruments that it's easier to replace than others, like here. That's actually kind of a tricky instrument to actually play in for some reason. It might just be my keyboard isn't very good. But so now let's do this. Let's go through. It's a little tedious, by the way. Like, this is sort of hard work to do this. But right now I'm looking at the melody for, let me solo it. I recommend when you're doing this, by the way, I recommend that you solo what you're focusing on, because if it sounds good by itself, then it will sound good when it's with all the other instruments for the most part. So here, it's all identical. I'm going to figure out how I want these things to stress. And usually I'll like try singing it somewhere over the rainbow. So some of these are going to come down because the on beats usually get stressed more. So somewhere over these are probably going to come down. So I'm going to bring those down. Does everyone know how I'm accessing this MIDI editing here, or are we a little confused by this? In case, you find your MIDI region that you want to edit, you just double click on it. And then there's this thing called a piano roll. That's what this is called, a piano roll. And there's an automation function here that lets me find these. Okay. So let's listen.
Your screen.
Huh?
What is happening to your screen?
What do you mean?
Your screen is just all messed up.
Yeah, it does look pretty messed up.
Uh-oh.
Like in the upper.
Just on the left.
Yeah. Agreed.
On the left?
Now it's better.
Now it's better, yeah.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Let me know. Yeah, let me know if stuff like that happens again. A lot of times high notes, if they have the same velocity, since they're just higher and they poke out more, sometimes I'll bring those down a little bit. So I'm going to be a little dramatic with how these velocities work, and I'll show you. I'm going to play what I have so far. These are a little too quiet, right? So I'll bring them up. But I like this direction. Maybe this will, and then this pulls back. So what I would do is I would kind of sing along or imagine how the performer would actually play it, and then go in and kind of pull the velocity up and down. That one would come down. Maybe that would come down too. I'd bring that one down a little bit. We only have this much more to go. I know this is boring. Ooh, when you get those fast notes, they sound really robotic. So usually when you get those 8th notes or 16th notes or whatever, that's where you can really tell, like, dot, 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 when you hear them back to back to back. Boom. I'm going to pull these down. Up. Da. Da. Da, da. So here you can tell the yellow ones are more stressed and the green ones are more soft. So if I'm looking at this, bum ba ba bum bum ba ba bum bum ba ba. That's kind of what it's doing. Those green ones are laying off a little bit. So this is what. Okay. And it still sounds a little herky-jerky, but my velocities are better. So that's what I would do. I would go through and find those melodic points where, especially where you have a lot of faster rhythms kind of right next to each other. I'd go in and I'd change those to be smoother. The other thing we can do is we can go in and actually edit the instrument. So here's what I did. I went over to my track thing over here, and I'm going to click on the instrument, and usually it has some options here of what I can change. And here right now, attack, I'm just going to talk about this one. Attack tells me how long it takes for the note to come on. So if I turn the attack up a lot, like right now, when the note appears, the note is on. If I turn up the attack, it's going to kind of swell into it. I'll turn it up a lot so you can tell. So all of them kind of have this wah, 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 wah. So I'll just listen to it and see if I can find a nice balance. Yeah, that sounds pretty good. They're helicopters. Hold on. Just a regular occurrence. Okay. So we added that. Now, what's something that we notice about how these sounds sound right now? Do they sound like do they exist in a beautiful cathedral with lots of air and space to reflect the sounds, or does it sound like it exists in a vacuum?
Hey, before we move on to the next bit, I don't know, I just had a question or thing I wanted to say about the velocity. Like
Sure.
when I've tried to like edit velocity in the past, like to do what you're doing to try and make it more human, I've had difficulty doing it without, I guess, like overdoing it. A lot of times I feel like it ends up sounding like it's emphasizing things too much and too little. I guess I could just try to not make it happen as strongly, but yeah, I don't know. I guess I just had that thought.
It is a bit of a rabbit hole to fall down into because there's almost no end to how much you can edit anything on your computer. But that's why I would emphasize trying to re-perform it into your computer to kind of see how you naturally would perform it and hear what sounds good as you're playing it. And then I would fine tune it from there. I don't know how to answer that because it sounds more like I have friends who are perfectionists and they will just sit there and edit velocities for days and no one but them can tell the difference. So I guess that's why I would say and only focus on the melody and step away from the computer sometimes and come back and see how it sounds. Don't sit there for hours and hours doing it. Just step away, eat an apple, come back, listen. Oh, that sounds pretty good. I don't know.
Yeah, that makes sense. That's good advice. I mean, all I was interested in is just, doing what you're doing, making it less robotic.
Yeah. So on that, making it less robotic, something that really helps is putting these electronic instruments and taking them and putting them into a space that sounds real. So does anyone have any suggestions of what I would do to put these in a space that sounds like it actually exists in the physical world? Any ideas? Reverb? That's it. Yeah. So a lot of these instruments, when you generate them, they'll come with their own reverb. I got rid of them because I just don't trust what Apple tells me I should do. So I'm like, no, I'm going to make my own reverb. So you go to audio effects. There's a other way of doing this. I'm going to show you if you just want to put it on one instrument, how you do it. I'm going to go to audio effects and down here you go to reverb. And reverb is basically, it simulates those instruments in a room and you can pick what kind of room you want. So you can do this with any plugin that looks like this, anything that says reverb. It doesn't matter what it is. I'm going to put it in a large space. There's a lot of options, but I'm going to put it in a large room. I'm going to put it in a big chamber. I don't know what this is going to sound like. Let's find out. I'll turn off the click. Do you hear that? Do you hear the effect that it's adding? Ooh, sounds like I need
So
to do
it
some
sounds
more.
like it's a single, like, lonely violin playing all by itself in, like, a big concert hall.
It does. It does.
It almost sounds like it almost feels a little bit too much,
Oh yeah, it is. So I'm going to show you how you can kind of ease back on that. You can choose how much you hear the reverb. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create this thing called a bus. I did this yesterday. So you have your effects that you can do, but you also have these things called sends. And what it does is it takes the audio from the track that you're on right now, and it doesn't put it on the track. It just takes that sound and attaches it to a different part of your DAW, and then it puts an effect on it. So I'm going to create bus. It already has some pre-created. Let's just use one of these. Well, no, let's do bus 1. So it's going to create a bus, and I'm going to put my audio effect on this bus. And I'm going to find that same sad, lonely, as Xander put it, the big chamber. And what I can do, there's this little circle here that will appear, and this will tell me how much I actually want to hear the violin in the big, lonely, sad chamber. So right now there's none. Now there's a lot. I'm going to pull it back a little bit. Now I'm going to take these other instruments and I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to send them to that same, I'm going to call it sad room. And they're all going to be sent to the sad room. And you have to turn up that circle to make sure that they're all together in the sad room. Otherwise, you won't hear them there. That took me a long time to figure out. All right, let's hear how they sound in the sad room. Okay, so let's hear what it sounds like without the sad room. This is without the sad room. This is with.
Sounds way fuller.
Yeah. When you have all this reverb swirling around, it just fills up the space. Suddenly it doesn't feel so dead and dry in your DAW. It adds a bunch of space, which makes it feel more real. It makes it feel more human. And I have some more editing I need to do. I think I need to turn this attack down because it kind of... like these here are so short that I think they actually need to have their own track. So I'm going to create like fast, loud. So whenever I have notes that need to be fast and loud, I'm going to copy and paste this. I'm going to mute all the other notes except for the ones I want fast and loud. And I'm going to, up here, I'm going to mute the ones too. So let's make sure that this, I know I'm doing it quite a bit right here, but I've just created another track that's going to perform a specific function, just like I did for pizzicato. So those two notes there, ba ba, those are now only on this track. Whereas before, this is what they were doing. Oh, missed it. Here they just were kind of lame. Meh, yeah, yeah. So I got rid of those and I put them on a different track. And actually I'm going to do that over here too, because listen to this. We have this big ramp thing that goes like this. I want that to be fast and loud. So I'm going to take that and I'm going to move it down here. Does everyone hear the distinction? Here, and now actually, since I did that, I can, come on, make this attack a little more. So this is what it sounds like without. kind
It's
of
really
lame.
shaky, like shaky and uncertain. Like it's not really.
Yeah, yeah. What is that called actually? If you play something like really, is that arco?
No, arco is just when you play it with the bow instead of plucking it.
Oh, what is it called? Like if I was just gonna play something really sure and strong, is there a term
Oh,
for
really strong?
like? I'm not playing it legato. I'm playing everything like I'm really sawing at it. Is there a word for that?
Forte?
Yeah, maybe just that. Forte. Sure, that one. So this is what it sounds like. Okay. So another thing I want to do over here though, we'll notice that this velocity is all the same. This is something that Mason actually showed me. So props to you, Mason. This is my velocities here. If I go in here and I want this to have all these sure supported notes, but I want them to kind of decrescendo. So I want them to go ba 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 ba, and then maybe reappear at the end. What I can literally do is I can grab here and draw a line. Oops. And I can draw a line for what I want the velocity to do. So now I have this sort of decrescendo, but I'm going to make it a little more like that. So now it sounds like. And then I want that last note, these last two notes to come up a little bit. So I'm going to do that. So now we have more human-like playing. And maybe those last notes.
The first note is a little bit loud.
Yeah.
I think yeah, there we go.
And actually then I also want this last one, instead of being this whatever, I don't even know the musical term, I don't want it to be sure and strong. I want it to have that same attack. I'm going to have it as the kind of swelly. I want it to do that. So now this is what we have. I'm going to make sure I put all my pizzicato into the sad room as well. Sounds more human now, right? It sounds like people are choosing how to actually play melodically. I would really stress, just focus on what the melody is doing and support that with all the other instruments. Okay, so to revisit what we've talked about, the easiest way to edit your MIDI to make it sound more like a person is playing. What's the easiest way to do it? What's the fastest and simplest way to do it? You use one of these and you re-perform it into your DAW. The other way that kind of made it sound more like a person is I went into the instrument and I edited some ways the instrument's being played. Instead of having it just land right when you press the note, it appears at full volume, I have it kind of swell in. That was helpful. I also split up the instruments. These three instruments are now actually just the exact same instrument. I just split up the pizzicato instrument, or the pizzicato violin, the forte violin, and the more legato violin. And then when I was doing the really tedious fine tuning, I made sure that I only focused on the melodic priority of each section. I don't want to get bogged down in starting at measure 1 and making sure all 10 instruments on measure 1 sound perfect. I want to start at measure 1 and be like, what's the focus here? Then I'm going to go to measure 10 and be like, what's the focus here? What can I do here to make the melody sound more human? Because as long as the melody is coming through and sounding human, that's what most people gravitate to, and the rest is supporting that. Does that make sense? All right. So any questions? Anything you want me to revisit? Anything you're confused about?
How did you send the like individual tracks to the sad room like mixer thing?
Oh, how did I choose? Do you mean the bus?
Yeah, like when the thing that currently says stereo out, how did that change to like sad room?
Oh, so the way that Logic has it set up is like I'm going to create a new random instrument, and it's all empty over here, right?
Yeah.
When you click on sends, and when I create a bus, you'll see, so this is stereo out right now. This is like the master track. When I create a send on instrument 3, watch stereo out. Watch what happens. I'm just going to create bus 10. It just puts that track right here.
Okay, so that's not replacing like the master.
No, it's not. Just like when you click, watch this track, like when you click on different things, it's gonna bring up, actually it'll just continue to bring up the stereo out. But say I started messing with this bus right now, it's stereo out right now, it'll automatically change it back to the sad room. But if you want, I think I know what all DAWs everyone here is using except for Mari. What DAW are you using?
Logic.
Oh, great. Okay, so this is all relevant to you. Excellent. If you need, because I have lessons with everyone else who's here, if you need help specifically, just email me about any of this stuff. But there's one really cool tool. If you hit Command 2, I don't know who has Logic open. If you hit Command 2, you're going to pull up your mix window. And this is a way to see all of the tracks that you have at any given time. So Nathan, this is where, if you're like, where'd the sad room go? Where'd the stereo out go? It's all here. Cool. And this actually, once I kind of have all my instruments in and I have them all edited the way I want to, I'll just pull this up and then I'll kind of sit back like this. Like, this is a really pleasant way of just kind of figuring out how I want my volumes to sit. It's kind of stressful to do it all like over here with a tiny little mouse. It's kind of nice to sit here and be like, oh, maybe I'll do this here, maybe I'll do this here, you know? So I would use this like when you're you know, reaching the end and you're kind of figuring out, you have all your instruments ready, you've performed everything, and you're trying to just figure out volumes and stuff. I'd go here and you know, have a nice time at the mix window. That's what that's called. I think it's up here. Open mixer. It's right here. Another handy tool or quick key is piano roll. So if I go like this and I hit Command 4, it opens up a separate piano roll that I can edit MIDI in. So that's another good one. But the
P on,
huh?
like if you press P on something, it'll also open it up.
Oh yeah. That will open up the bottom piano roll. Yeah, that's true. This one, when I hit Command 4, it's sort of like this floating window that I can like move around. The P one is this like connected one that's sitting down here. But yeah, that's good to know actually. P for piano roll. Any other questions? Do people get what a bus is? You can create multiple buses. You can have a bunch of instruments go to different buses. If I wanted one reverb for the violins and a different reverb for the cellos, I could say, I don't want that bus. I want this to have its own cello bus. And I'm going to put a different type of reverb. And it's going to be a warped space. Let's see what this does. I don't know. We're just killing time now.
What did you just assign it? Helicopter pad? Is that what it said it was?
It was called helicoptered.
Oh.
I don't know.
How did you delete
But
it?
anyway, you can create a different bus. All right. Any questions?
How did you delete that? How did you remove the bus?
Here's cello bus. No send.
Oh, you just click no send. Okay.
Click no send. Yep. And if you want, I'm going to go to the mix window. If you're like, oh, this cello bus is bad, delete. It's gone.
Oh.
Anything else anybody wants to talk about? Like anything about a DAW, anything at all?
Could you talk about like
I have questions.
fading and stuff?
Okay, you both do. Nathan, I heard your voice first. What did you say?
Could you talk about like fading and stuff? Like
Fading, like a crossfading,
all
sure.
that.
So I'm gonna open up the project I was doing yesterday. I won't say that. Hey, never seen the world from here. Okay, so this is something that's pretty handy. Like if I have, say I was, well, this actually might be relevant. Okay, so let's listen to just this part. But then you slipped away, Joan at it. Oh no, that actually works fine. So fading is a way for you to take different audio and have it seamless, even though when they, like if I was right here, this is kind of hard to talk about because I've practiced it a lot. So, Joan had a daughter, treat her like a brother. Joan had a sister, never thought I'd miss her. Joan has us all, yeah, loved you. So, let's say, for the sake of experiment, I wanted to replace something and I had this and it sounded like this. Never thought I'd miss her. Joan has us all. There's that little clip, right? Kind of annoying. So since these are two different, they're recorded at different times and I sang them a little differently, there's no way to have these audio right next to each other without there being some sort of like distortion that appears. This weird little click, this little like, if you're ever listening to a recording, because there are a lot of these like in pop songs, sometimes you'll hear, not a lot, but sometimes you'll hear someone when they were editing, you know, you might just hear like a little, or just like a little glitch and someone forgot to do this or they missed one. So what I can do in up here, there are these different tools, and I'm going to click on this one, and I'm going to click on the fade tool. And now when I hover over here, I can create a fade. Boom. This won't be perfect, but I'll show you kind of the gist of it. So it's not perfect, probably because I made the fade too big. Let's try and make it a little smaller. Let's try dragging this over a little bit. Okay, so this volume is a little small, so I'm actually gonna, or comparatively quiet, so I'm gonna turn it up over here. And now I'm gonna try to fade. It's pretty smooth now. It's not perfect still, but it's a lot smoother than it was. So that's what a fade does. And visually what it's doing here, you can see this top part here is this audio, and it starts here and it turns it down. And at the same time, it takes this audio here and it starts turning it up here. That's what it's doing. And we can mess around with this. Maybe this needs to be all the way over here. Maybe this word. You know. Yeah, that was all right. Okay, so that's what fades are. Does that make sense? How to access that and how to...
Is that the only track that's playing right now?
Yep. Do you
So
want
then why isn't there a little bit of silence right there?
Huh?
Like, wouldn't it fade to, like...
The thing, it's
Why
not...
aren't we still
it's
hearing a click if it's not fading silent?
It's not a fade out. It's a fade. It's called a crossfade.
Yeah.
What's happening is the first.
No, I understand what's happening. I just don't understand why we aren't still hearing a click.
Because the first take is because basically the takes are overlapping a little bit. They're both like the end of the first take is playing at the same time as the beginning of the second take. It's just that the first take is fading out and the second one is fading in at the same exact speed, and then that happens together. And if you do it right, it sounds smooth.
And yeah, that's exactly it. And the whole thing about fades is, if you ever have a clip, like if I wanted this to stop here, did you hear that click?
Yeah.
What I can do is I can create a fade out, and this is what people do all the time, because there's no way to stop audio in the middle of it happening without it being like, it just sounds like you slap someone in the face. So if I have this fade out, it's going to sound like, it's a little smoother. So what they're doing when you crossfade is you're double doing that. So you're fading out, so you get rid of that first click, and then you're fading in, so you get rid of the second click.
Okay.
This is really helpful for editing your audio to make sure that it's smooth.
That makes sense.
Xander, what do you want to talk about?
Okay, yeah. So I had a couple of questions. Okay, so one is I was wondering about using pitch bend with MIDI, and I was partially wondering about how to do that, I guess, in Reaper specifically, since Reaper is the program that I use. But it's also a good just general question, like how do you do pitch bend well in like pitch bend and also like vibrato with MIDI instruments?
Mm.
You use the pitch bend wheel on your keyboard.
I don't have a pitch bend wheel.
Oh, you don't?
No.
Let's do this.
I have a pitch bend button, which doesn't work.
Oh.
I'm just gonna create. I'm gonna create a random software instrument, I'm gonna make it a synthesizer because that is actually relevant.
Like
Yeah.
for vibrato, you can create with like when you open a voice editor, you can create vibrato with like key switches or
It's pretty loud, isn't it?
If you're using a what?
when you open the voice editor for certain instruments.
Okay, so can we hear
Yeah.
this? Can we hear this analog thing I'm playing? This little synth.
Make it a little bit louder. I can't hear it very well.
Can you hear that?
Yeah, it kind of has a little bit of vibrato on it already. Could we have something that has a smoother tone?
Let's try this. Man, most of these are gonna. Here, let's go back to this. Let's just turn off the vibrato.
It's there.
Okay, so what you can maybe do with pitch bend, most of the automation for MIDI should have this option. I actually don't know. I've never done this, so let's find out. What an epic performance. Okay, so let's open up automation here. And let's see what they have. We have vibrato.
Vibrato death. That's good.
Vibrato.
I don't know how I would do that on my own thing. But
Let's see what this does. Oh yeah.
okay.
Okay, so that
Okay,
does that.
so you should be able to open something that would let you have like a graph of the vibrato.
Yes, and let's see
Okay.
glide. Let's see what this does. Oh, well, I don't have multiple notes, so this isn't going to really do anything. But let's try. I'm going to put
Are you
that
sure
there.
that it has to have multiple notes?
It needs to be able to glide from one note to the next note. And if there's only one note, it won't glide. Glide A, B time. That doesn't look like that's what we want.
I feel like it would be in the MIDI editor itself, in terms of pitch bend, because then because then there should be a way to edit the pitches of like this specific notes, right?
Yeah, I think you're right. Let's try it.
The,
By the way, if this isn't relevant to anyone, you are free to leave at any moment.
Like open a new project and see if I can help out here.
Okay.
Because I think I've seen it somewhere.
Note velocity, pitch bend. There it is. Okay.
Oh, you found it. So it's not.
yeah, and is there a way to edit like the Yeah, is there a way to edit the curve of it? Like the curve of the graph?
Oh, sure. Like
Yeah.
Yeah, you basically start out by creating a bunch of straight lines, but then you can kind of do that. So this will be like
Yeah.
I just updated Logic and they included some curve tools. You curve some of those lines.
Yeah, there's probably a way to use curve. Okay, so that's how you do it in Logic. Eric, I'm going to ask you more about this in our lesson.
Sure. I would, yeah, I mean, I know it looks like you go to automation and then they have all these MIDI things you can automate. There might even be vibrato might be a modulation thing. I just put that in that was an option in Logic's thing. Okay. I got to end now because I got to go to private lessons. Let me know if you have any questions about any of this stuff, and I'll see most of you later. And Mari, if you have any questions at all, let me know so I can help. All right. Thanks for being here. Bye.
Bye.